Welcome to Behind the Story, where we discover the story behind your favourite stories. My name is Lisa Renee from the CoLab Press, and I'm also a contemporary romance writer.
And I'm Naomi Craig, author of biblical fiction. You had a great pre-recorded interview with Meredith Resce. We have her back on the show. Due to her being on like the opposite side of Australia, I wasn't able to make that one. So I'm excited to see what you guys talked about. But before we get into that, what have you been up to?
Well, yeah, it was a great interview, and it's interesting discussing what Meredith brings up in the interview, and she's talking about what she's writing with her next book in the Trinity Lakes romance series. And I've also I've got my edits back from my editor, so I've applied those for my Trinity Lakes book, which is releasing in April. And yeah, it was interesting, some of my editor's comments, because she's an avid reader of Christian fiction, and she's been an editor for a long time. And she's very, cautious of what, not to offend certain readers. And obviously we're trying to fit, just in the mainstream sort of,
Right.
fit a bigger
As
audience.
much as be at peace with all people, as much as it depends on you.
we try. So yeah. Meredith touches on this, doesn't go into too much detail, but, she finds, like in a book she's writing now, and even probably the first one, getting into these could perhaps be controversial sort of things, and like, oh, now I've got to dig my way out of it. Why have I even done this hard thing? And like, so so it's interesting. And I mean, I know even with your genre, Naomi, like historical fiction and Bible times, some Christians would be sensitive, like, oh, you're
right,
changing the Bible.
Don't mess with the Bible.
Cannot add any one word. You're gonna get thrown into like a fire. So, I don't know. So there is like this, how much do we cater to our readers as well, and trying to, please all. But obviously, even some Christians wouldn't even read romance novels.
Right.
Right. It's there might be just only a little kiss at the end or something. It's, very pure sort of thing, mostly on Christian fiction books. So so it's interesting. And one of my comments from my editor, I had a little reference of because there's a sheriff, he's quite strict and stern, and he's Justin's trying to date his daughter, and the sheriff's done the wrong thing by Justin, and then the police officer says, oh, to get an apology from the sheriff, like, I'll believe that when as much as I believe the earth is flat, Anyway, my editor's like, some people do believe and I on the first read through she commented, but on the second edit she gave me a link and everything like that. But I said to her, oh, actually in my Sweet and Clean rom-coms, I have a whole chapter on the character goes on a date, and then the guy believes, she says, I'll tell something fun and quirky about you. And then he says, oh, like to eat baked beans and banana mixed together. And she's going, and then he goes, oh, there is something else. And then he says, well, some of my friends tease me about it, but I believe that the earth is flat, and then she's like, yeah. She's like, ding, 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 get out of here, sort of thing. So anyway, it's interesting, like, it's like, well, comedians do make light of politics and different beliefs and stuff, and sort of calls it out what we probably wouldn't actually say. We'd be a bit more sensitive, like.
Well, so then that brings up a point too, like, what about if your characters believe that? Like just because I, as the author, stand by this set of what I believe is biblical guidelines, does that mean that all of my characters are going to stand up by that? Like, I mean, if you look at just even Christians in different circles, I'm sure there's different things that you and I hold on to as firm and fast, so it's like, I think that there can be, as long as the reader is willing to hear that this is the character's beliefs and not necessarily the author. Like, you have a disclaimer, like, this does not represent the parent company. Like,
yeah, that's right. And also your character might change. Like, so my side character, Marcus, he's not he believes in God and all that, but he's not really like full on. And he does challenge the Christians, and it sort of just does challenge them, the Christians as well. What do I believe? Right. And he has his journey, and probably he'll be in the next book as a main character and have continue his faith journey. But yeah, that's right. And some of the stuff he says, you could be offended by, probably like, well, I don't believe in da 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 da, you know, these
why is Lisa
religious
Renee
laws.
writing this?
Yeah, like challenging. That's fun,
Yeah.
you know, this, why do you live like that? You know, but it's
Right.
the character. So,
and this is your Trinity Lakes. This is coming up in this month, which is actually really cool, because even though I haven't read most of your previous books, like I can still recognize that you've got some of your previous characters showing up, and that's really cool.
yeah, so Marcus is a side character in my Trinity Lakes book, but he's actually in the book 1 of my Single Gan series, and he's in at least in the book 4, but it just shows his journey when he's a young adult, like an 18-year-old. He's even really more rough then, and he's getting discipled by the chef Chris, the Christian guy.
Right. And Chris comes over.
And Chris comes over with him to Trinity Lake, so because Chris is American. So yeah, it's nice to link that series to the Single Gan series.
Nice.
You know, you've got a little spin-off, and Marcus, you can follow Marcus and to the US, so that makes it interesting.
That's very cool.
Yeah. So what about you? What have you been up to the last couple of weeks?
Well, still plugging away on and their numbers grew, so I'm hoping to get that done. I should be having edits for Shira's story soon, so I'm hoping that they don't cross, so I can just like section it off and go back to this section. My brain's really like not letting me multitask these days, so I'm hoping for that. But I actually was on Avid Readers of Christian Fiction, the Facebook group, the other day, and I got a whole bunch of potentially new questions that we can start filtering in that the readers want to know from the authors. So I thought that was very helpful. If you were one of the ones who made that comment, then be on the lookout for some of your questions coming up. So that'll be exciting.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Mix it up a little bit, and
we got some deep questions there, and
if anyone else wants to comment on our YouTube or our blog, like you can say what questions you want, and also what Christian fiction authors that you want us to read, or Sweet and Clean authors. And also you can comment on what we've just been discussing about how sensitized do you want your Christian fiction to be. And doesn't matter. We've got a filtered inappropriate comments on our YouTube. If we get nasty one. No, but I know we're all you know, open and stuff like that. But yeah, what does that annoy you? Like, how much do you want it filtered, or do you really like?
Do you want to see a little bit more real life? Or yeah, absolutely. And be sure that while you're at it, be sure to like and subscribe so you get all the updates when we bring on fantastic authors. And that's one thing that I've noticed when I've read Meredith's books in the past. She's not afraid to call out Christians for being, why are you holding on to this rule? Like you were saying, your Marcus guy, like, why are you doing this? That's ridiculous. Like, this is what Jesus said, is let's love God and love others. Like, so I think that'll play in some really nice with her Trinity Lakes book. Well, with any of her books, she just kind of calls people out for maybe some of our like stodgy beliefs, I guess.
Yeah, and definitely. I mean, I find that in my book as well, and it's just sort of something, I guess, you know, it just sort of naturally comes out, and because as you grow as a Christian, and this happens and that happens, and then your compassion expands, and you've lived more life, and you know, you see where people are, and then so we grow, you know, in that. Would you like to introduce Meredith on? And
yes, absolutely. All right. Our guest today is Australian author Meredith Resce. Meredith's latest offerings include Daring Mr. Darcy with Carolyn Miller, He, She, and Meant to Be, and the Luella Linley series. Her books are full of fun and real-life characters and situation. Meredith, welcome back to Behind the Story.
Thanks so much for having me again. It's great to be here on Behind the Story.
Okay, so for those who aren't familiar with you, Meredith, tell us a little bit about you and what you write.
Well, as you have probably can hear, I am an Australian. I'm a very proud Australian if you're allowed to be proud.
That's not Australian to be proud.
No, it's not, is it? But I'm happy to be an Australian, very happy. I have been writing since 1997, Christian fiction, mainly Christian fiction. My initial launch into the market and greatest success in the past was with historical romance. In more recent times, I've merged towards contemporary romance and with a little bit of rom-com involved. And I actually don't mean to write rom-com, it just accidentally happens. And in the in-between times, I have also written a fantasy allegory, time travel adventure, cozy mystery, crime drama, memoir, screenplay, and that's, I've messed around with everything.
Wow. Excellent. All right. Well, we'll definitely have your website in the show notes if people want to check out all those genres and all the stuff you've done over the years. But before we move on, like, how many books do you know how many books you're up to now?
Well, counting novellas, 26.
Great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well,
that doesn't count rewrites and re-releases as well.
They're always good fun. Okay, so your latest book is with the multi-author series, the Trinity Lakes romance. It's Christian.
So exciting.
So it's called The Ocean Between Us. Alana has set off on a trip of a lifetime. Her best friend from high school, Sasha Kennedy, has invited her to Trinity Lakes, Washington State, to be part of her wedding party. South Australia to Trinity Lakes is literally the other side of the world. So Alana has a full schedule of adventure planned while she's away: a summer camp counselor, a trip to Canada, sightseeing in New York and Boston, and avoiding Sasha's twin brother, Caleb. What is the story behind The Ocean Between Us?
Well, when I was invited into this set, and we as a group of authors had decided that we would set the stories in the USA. I really wanted to be part of it, but then I thought, oh my goodness, I've never been to the USA. I know the USA from what I've watched on television, loads of American television, which is probably not true to life. But anyway, I don't know. So I said, look, I'm in, but I really would like to make sure that one of my characters is just like me, Aussie, all the way. So she's going to visit, and she's going to bring that part of me to the United States. And my other main character, Caleb, had lived in Australia for 5 years during his teen years. That's where they first met, and they went through high school together and had a high school romance. They were very strongly connected, and then were split apart because he returned back to where his grandparents lived in Trinity Lakes. And so I allowed myself that, because that way Caleb can be a bit Australian because he's familiar with it, even though he's American. But Alana can be Australian, and nobody's going to worry about it too much, hopefully.
You can get away with using some Australian language.
I'm learning to speak American.
Yes, we are.
Well, American. So.
It catches up on you, and I start saying American words when I'm at home, and
yes,
put it in the trunk. And in Australia, we say the boot of our car, which sounds weird to Americans. Put it in your boot. But anyway, I would like, while we're here, ask our viewers, what do you think about learning about other countries, having a different character? Do you like to have your stories have an American character involved so you feel connected to the story? Or, what's your thoughts about that? Because the publishing industry tells us, international authors, that Americans like, to feel connected, and they like to have an American character. So what this series is doing is having both. So it's set in America, American characters and some Australian characters. And so it can create a lot of fun of the conflict and the...
And I guess sometimes some American readers are a little bit tentative to go to overseas settings. It's they're comfortable, they're cozy in what they know. Fair enough. All right. So if we can't bring them to us, we'll go to them. So here we are. We've rolled up. We've rolled into town. Trinity Lakes. Here we come.
And the story, does it have a scene in Australia part way through or at the end?
At the end.
At the end. Awesome. Cool. Well, we won't tell too much because you guys have to read it. So what's the release date for this? It should be
28th of March.
Right.
Yeah.
So this launches, this goes April the 1st. So everyone, it is there available the first week on all platforms. And then it will later will be in Kindle Unlimited. So tell us about Alana. What are her strengths and quirks?
Well, I was thinking about her. Look, she seems to be an easy to get along with person. She's got a nice, stable personality. She's not easily ruffled. She's good in a crisis. You'll see in one of the a couple of the scenes, there's a couple of crises arise, and she keeps a reasonably cool head. And she's got a fairly honest evaluation of herself. She knows when her and Caleb split up just after high school, that was because his parents took him home to America. She knew then that she would never follow because her heart was too firmly planted in Australia. She's too Australian. She can go on an adventure, but she knows that she just couldn't give up her family, her community, and the place where she's highly connected to. And that's the big obstacle that stands between her and Caleb. But she has a very strong sense of place. What else did I write? I don't know. I can't. Oh, she doesn't feel that she can sacrifice her home and her family.
Yep.
For Caleb.
Sorry, Kaylas. If you want it to work, you're going to have to go to Australia. All right. So your last couple of books have been collaborated with co-authors in some kind of fashion. So how do you enjoy it? Do you enjoy this team aspect? How's it going with that?
Look, it's not the first time I've done collaboration. In fact, I've just written a whole series on one of the Facebook pages on all my collaborations that I've been involved with. And when I'm co-writing with people, the twice that I've done that, it has been an absolute barrel of laughs and a great deal of fun. It goes at such speed because there's more than one creative writing head on the same story at the same time, and we just churn the books out. Sometimes you get on really well with the authors that you're working with. In this series, we're writing our own story. We're collaborating on the town and side characters, and we're collaborating on trying to work characters from somebody else's stories into mine. And I had a bit of bother with my first one because I got off out of the gates really early and got the novel wrote really early before anybody else got theirs written. And even though they talked about, I'm going to have this character and that character, I hadn't connected with the other authors' characters yet in a way that I could safely slot them in. So I've had to go back and do a bit of slotting after the other books began to emerge. But yeah, it's a great little project. And I hope it goes really well. And I hope that it reads like Trinity Lakes does belong to everybody. I hope that that comes across. Yeah, I think it will.
Yeah, great. Well, I'm one of the authors on the next book after Meredith. And yeah, it has been a bit of a stretch for us all to try and like knit it together, but I think all the hard work is, going to be worthwhile. But the first author, Narelle Atkins, she really set up the town and had a lot of the characters in her book. So she did the hard yards and made it all work for us. And then we're all visiting the same cafes in the town, and there's characters coming in and out. So yeah, it's definitely been a challenge, and I hope the readers appreciate us making the effort.
I tell you one thing that has been interesting to watch. There's a couple of characters a couple of writers in our group who are very visual thinkers. They've got maps, and they've got street maps, and they've got everything down to a T. And I'm looking at it and going, I'm a very, general idea type of thinker, and let the reader go where they will with their mind. And I'm trying to write to these maps and things that they've got, trying to see it how they've obviously seen it. So I say a bit generic there because I sometimes can't always see exactly what they've written down. So that's interesting to see how we think differently. Some people might they've got maps and streets and
Yeah,
thinking,
yeah. I think it helps
whatever.
to sort of, if you base it on a real town, maybe you don't name it, but you make up your fictional
Yeah.
town, call it Trinity Lakes. But if it's based on some kind of real town, then that really does make it easy for the people who need the visual. And but yeah, when you're creating the whole, oh, let's have this street here and making it all up in maps and like, yeah, it's hard for me as well to visually like picture that. So but anyway, I think we'll see the feedback from the reviews and what they think. People seem to love series. I like returning characters, settings. So we've got some anchor characters, like you know, tell us a little bit about that. Do you have any anchor characters in yours?
Well, I don't know if anybody's used them yet. James and Marianne Kennedy, that's the Kennedys' parents, who were teachers. They did international teaching for a while with their family. They did New Zealand, they did Australia, and hence the connection. And they went back to America. And they are. I believe he's the principal, and she's the history teacher at the high school at Trinity Lakes. So I don't know if they'll pop up in other people's stories, but they're there. But I do have a character who accidentally became quite the focus in almost everybody's. But I won't tell you who that is, because that would give the story away, wouldn't it? It would be
you could give us a little bit of hint, but anyway, it's an antagonist. Yes,
let's just say it's an antagonist.
Yeah, I really loved and enjoyed and it was handy to have her and put her in my story. So you have to read Meredith. I think she's in the first few books anyway, quite a few of the books. So yeah, that's great. Okay, so you've got a part-time job. You help your husband run a church. So how do you squeeze in time to writing into your life? Because you seem to, like, when you want to decide to write a book, you do it pretty quickly.
Well, actually, we actually don't run a church anymore. Since we come back to Adelaide, my husband works in the national leadership team of the organisation that we work with. So he does church work out and about, apostolically encouraging leaders and one thing and another. And I go with him sometimes. And I actually am a relief teacher at school. They would like me to, oftentimes the schools would like me to take on a contract and be the English teacher or the history teacher or something. And I look at it and I go, yeah, nah. Because when you're signed on the dotted line and you're the teacher of those little cherubs, you're at high school, I teach high school, you're responsible for making everything happen. And when you're the relief teacher, you come in and you get the teacher's notes in the morning, you read through them, yes, no worries, easy peasy. You sit down at the end of the lesson. If the little cherub has been anything but a little cherub and doesn't connect, I go home. It's not my problem. I don't have to write a report. I don't have to call the parents. It's not my problem. I like that. It's much better, less stress. However, sometimes when I'm a relief teacher, I get given classes like the senior physics class or the senior specialist maths class, which I love those classes because they are the nerds. They're the ones who come in who love maths and who love physics, and they want to achieve A+. So they're in the classroom and heads down, and they confer with each other if they don't know what they're doing. And my presence is surplus to requirements. And so I plug in my USB and I write. Done. And that's probably when I get a lot of writing done, when they give me classes like that. Not all classes are like that. Sometimes I'm very, very active in the class, having to teach this and the other thing. But there are a number of classes that are not. And so I look at my day and think, beauty, I've got physics. Because I don't know any physics.
Right. You can't help them. Sorry, kids, I can't help you with this. I'm just child minding and I'm going to write my book.
Every now and again I'll stop because I'm talking to teenagers and I'll say, so if you were in this situation, what would you say?
Yes.
So I actually interrupt them every now and again for a little interview on something to do with thinking younger, because obviously I'm a lot older than younger.
Obviously, okay. You're looking pretty good for your age. We won't
divulge.
we won't
No.
say, we won't go there. But yes,
No.
I'm becoming a nan this year, so I'm coming into your zone. Because I've been getting jealous of all Meredith's baby photos of all her grandchildren, and I'm jealous. But gonna happen to me. Okay, so what is something readers would be surprised to learn about you?
Well, I don't know, but they might not be surprised. But like I said, I was a co-writer and co-producer on a screen, like a screen production, feature film production. I even appeared in the film as one of the minor characters. And that is actually available on Amazon Prime if anybody's interested in Australian drama. It's not the Christian fiction genre, it's just Australian drama. And that was fun.
And it's called
Twin Rivers.
Twin Rivers.
Yes.
Wow, that's sort of a little bit like Trinity Lakes. Twin Rivers.
It is a little bit.
And
it's very not like Trinity Lakes.
Not Christian fiction.
Yeah, I was the co-writer on that. The young fellow who was the writer and the director and whatever. I say young fellow, it was 20 years ago. It was his story and I was helping him.
Great. Good on you. Yes. And you also, I remember on our conference, you mentioned you co-wrote someone else's story and you were coaching them how to write a story. That was a different genre. That was
a memoir.
A memoir.
Yeah, that was the story. A couple of pastors that I worked with in Melbourne, they had been right in the thick of the Black Saturday bushfires, really devastating. There was over 270 people were killed in that fire, plus massive loss. And they were right on the edge of it and right in the thick of it and worked in the relief effort for 3 years. And when they were telling me some of the stories, I said, you have to write a book. And they had no idea how to do that. So I worked with them and I got them to write their things and then I would knit it together with a bit of narrative in between. So that was memoir. Amazing story. That was called Hell on the Doorstep.
Wow, what a title. Okay. Now switching gears here. Your books have humor and light-hearted fun, but you're also unafraid to call out Christian culture for adhering to the letter of the law rather than the spirit of the law. So what inspires this aspect of your writing?
Like I've been brought up conservative Christian and have adhered to most of conservative Christian ideals and thinking most of my life until my daughter, in her angsty teenage years, this was a while ago, she got right into all the social justice things that were going along, and it caused a lot of clashes actually. What are you talking about? And I, a lot of clashes because they're so and I'm so there was that. So that's been 20 years in the making of me and her learning to communicate. As she's quite mature now, but she's still very, very fiercely driven by the causes of social justice. And so we do a lot of talking together. We've learned how to communicate. We've learned how not to be reactive towards each other, or towards her towards Christianity and me towards social justice issues. In other words, we're trying to, what she calls, find the common ground. What is common? What would Jesus do in this situation kind of business? How would he view this? Because sometimes, and I have found over the years, that some of my conservative Christian thinking was really quite blinkered and narrow. And I was just reactive to anybody that just didn't think straight like that. And the culture that had been developing and has developed is, if you don't think like me, then you must be, we can't, have anything to do with you because you don't think like me. And in actual fact, what I find out is, and of course I work with teenagers too, who all think like this all the time. If I don't have some kind of ability to listen and some level of being able to connect with what their heart is, because what I've learned is that a lot of the social justice things, some of it's, a lot of ratbags trying to cause trouble. It's true. But there is a whole percentage of it, and a greater percentage of it, I think, that are people who have genuine compassion for genuine situations and needs and they have seen that the Christian church historically has been very harsh and oftentimes cruel to people who have not fit within the narrow confines. And that leaves people outside who don't ever connect with Christ or Christianity because of the Christ that we are presenting. We're presenting a Christ that is harsh and doesn't want to have anything to do with very real needs, very real hurts. Like I say, yes, there are troublemakers. Yes, there is a lot of rah-rah, there's a lot of nonsense, of course, but there's a lot of common ground. And so because I am forced, I've been forced because it's my family relationship. I need to learn how to relate to my children who think differently to me. And I think to myself, how do they think differently to me? That's not how I brought them up, but they do. And so do all the teenagers that I work with, even though they're in Christian schools. They just think differently. I had to learn to listen and try to find that common ground so that I can still connect with them and they can connect with me, because I want them to not shut off Jesus because of me. Goodness gracious, that is something that really is a concern to me, where I hear young people who were brought up in Christ have shut out Christianity and God because of the Christ that has been presented to them, which I don't really believe was the true, compassionate, loving heart of Christ. And so, yes, that's why I do sometimes wander into those realms in a way that I'm trying to build a bridge. I'm trying to build a bridge.
Great. Well, there'll be a lot of our viewers who, you know, do have adult children or teenagers, or, you know, older adults. And, you know, when we first started as parents, you know, we had this ideal that, you know, we're going to raise them this way and they're going to do that. We're going to teach them. I'm going to teach them really well with the toddlers, and I won't have the teenagers.
They'll be just like me. It's not happening.
They will not make the mistakes that I made, and they will be perfect.
Oh,
and then, you know, they have free will, and then yes, what do we do with that? But yeah, it is a bit of let go and let God, and you know, praying.
But sometimes, Lisa, I have to say this: I'm not always right. I've come to that. In fact, I'm often not right, and I'm often making judgments on very narrow information. And if I listened and learned more, my judgments would be different. Like my reactions would be different, and I wouldn't be as harsh. Like, I know in my younger years, you could accuse me of having been harsh. And I've learned, wait a minute, I need to stop and listen a little bit. I need to be a bit more humble. I need to be humble. I don't always have to be right about everything. I just have to be humble before God, you know, and others. Yeah, that's
Definitely.
what I've learned.
Definitely. And I think there's a few authors in the Trinity Lakes series who are bringing that message. I know myself, there's a lot about the different, you know, mindsets and, you know, how that comes across and why we have certain convictions, but like, how do we push that onto other people? And then there's Jenny, who, another author, where she's gone through her journey, and her character starts off very, you know, rigid and strict. And it's not that she changes her convictions as such, but she's just, she goes through some character.
Begins to soften.
Yeah.
And I'm really concerned about the Jesus that we show to people. I want to be Christ-like. I really actually do want to be Christ-like, and not just fighting for, you know, I'm right and you have to think the way I think, because not everybody does. Not everybody will think the way I'm thinking now. Even as I'm saying it, people say, well, I don't think I agree with you. And that's okay. That's all right. I don't mind.
Yep, we're all on the journey, and the things that I was so strong about 20 years ago is different today. So okay, so tell us what's coming next as far as your writing.
Well, I'm busy beavering in my physics lessons, writing my second story in the Trinity Lakes series, which will come next year. And of course, I've bitten off a character issue and theme that's like, why did I do this? It's so because it's not straightforward. Why can't I just write straightforward?
Well, I think if you've written that many books, it's good to give yourself a bit of a challenge.
Do it
And
all
dig
the
yourself out of
time.
those plot holes and character.
I paint myself into these theological and social corners and think, oh, goodness gracious, now I've got to get out of this alive.
Yes. Oh, I'm guilty of doing that. Okay, so where can readers find you online?
www.meredithresce.com.
Well, thank you so much for coming back on Behind the Story.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's a real privilege.
Oh, that was so fantastic. I'm so glad we had Meredith back on. Remember to connect with Meredith and her books at her website. All those links will be in the comments below. She is offering a copy of The Ocean Between Us, paperback for Australian addresses or digital international. As always, we all have freebies linked in our show notes. If you're here for the biblical fiction, I've got my novella On Desolate Heights that tells Balaam's story and his talking donkey.
And if you'd like a Christian rom-com, I've got a free novella called Fake Engagement Mistake. It's also in audiobook, and that's on my website. The link's in the show notes too.
Coming up next, we welcome sweet romantic comedy author Savannah Scott. We're excited about that interview. Comment below, let us know some questions you'd like to hear from authors and what authors you'd like to hear them from. And we'd be happy to add them onto our lineup for this year. So until next time, thanks for joining us on this edition of Behind the Story. Until next time, let us run with endurance the race set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. See you next time.